Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here tonight. If I could ask you to take your seats, I think we're going to get started. My name is Councillor Angie Qualley. I'm happy to be here tonight on behalf of the Township of Langley Council and as co-chair of the Seniors Advisory Committee. Also with us here tonight are Councillor Bob Long at the back, Councillor Charlie Fox, Councillor David Davis, Councillor Michelle Sparrow, and Councillor Patrina Arneson. Also from the City of Langley, I've seen Paul Albrecht, Councillor Albrecht, and Councillor Val Vandenbroek come in. Did I miss anybody from the city? No, just the two of you? Thank you. Mayor Froh sends his regrets tonight and has left you with me, so he apologizes he can't be here. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're on the unceded traditional territories of the Kwantlen, Katzie, Semiahmoo, and Matsqui First Nations. We appreciate you taking the time to join us as we host a panel discussion that will explore the question, what is social sustainability? The Township of Langley is an exceptional place to live, work, learn, and play, but not everyone in our community is thriving. Social issues like homelessness, substance abuse, and poverty are not just big city challenges. To address such challenges, the Township has launched a 2-year process to prepare a social sustainability strategy, the municipality's first comprehensive social plan. Once complete, this strategy will provide the groundwork for the Township's actions on social issues over the next decade. The panel discussion this evening officially kicks off the preparation of the Social Sustainability Charter. In the coming months, the Township will be launching various engagement activities so that local residents and stakeholders can provide their thoughts and input into the process. We hope this discussion inspires you to add your voice to the strategy. To receive notifications about upcoming public engagement activities and for updates on the project, visit tol.ca/social strategy. I'd like to thank all the members of the panel who are offering their time and expertise to us tonight, and to the Township staff who put this together, particularly Patrick Ward, our social planner, and his team. Francis has a master's, It's my pleasure this evening to introduce the moderator for our panel, Francis Beulah. Francis has a master's in communication from Simon Fraser University and has been in journalism for more than 30 years. You probably know Francis's name from the issues she covers for the Globe and Mail, Vancouver Magazine, BC Business, and other publications in Canada and the US. A journalism instructor at Langara College and an adjunct professor at UBC, Francis has received the Canadian National Magazine Award and the Atkinson Fellowship in Public Policy, which she used to study homelessness and housing issues. Thank you for being here, Francis. Welcome to Langley, and I will turn that over to you.
Thanks. So, is my microphone working here? Yes? Okay, great. So thanks for inviting me. I get a lot of invitations to moderate or speak on panels, and I turned down the Vancouver Board of Trade because it was too boring to come out to make my monthly appearance here. Instead, I love coming out to different parts of the region. I cover urban issues, which means beyond the borders of Vancouver. So it's really nice for me to be able to come out here and hear about some of the issues that are percolating out here. I know how much Langley is changing. I've been writing for years about the changes that people have been observing, and I remember talking to councillors 10 years ago saying, we're getting this whole new wave of people, they're young, they want to feel like they're in a city, they're not moving out here for to live on a farm anymore. This is really a changing community, and I think you all know better than I do how much it's changing, and why there's a need for this kind of forum and for a social planner, in smaller towns, and I've worked in smaller towns too. Things happen sort of organically, the generations connect, or social problems are dealt with sort of at a lower level, but when you get bigger and it gets more complex, sort of a more formal program for how you're going to manage social issues, does become a necessity. And just before I turn over to the speakers, who are mostly going to speak tonight, not me, but one of the interesting things that I read years ago was that urban type problems exist not just in big cities, but also in suburbs. But the issue in suburbs is that people are not used to, they don't expect to see them. And so it's a little bit more challenging sometimes for them to deal with those same social issues because, you know, they think that, oh, this is just a big city problem. It doesn't really exist here. And sometimes it's just, you know, a question of acknowledging what's actually happening. So anyway, just for the routine tonight, we're going to hear from each of the speakers here between 5 and 10 minutes. They're going to kind of give an overview of social sustainability or programs that they work in and so on. And then the second half of the evening will be for questions and discussion, not necessarily just questions. Some of you may have expertise you want to share. So questions and discussion with you. That's the way it's going to roll out. And I can be mean if we're running short of time and people are going on a bit too long. So, but I hope I don't have to be. I hope I get to show my nicer self. Okay, so the first speaker we're going to hear from is Meg Holden, just to my right here, who is an associate professor of urban studies and geography at SFU and a research associate of the Canadian Index of Wellbeing. I didn't know that, so that's great. She has a PhD in public and urban policy and a master's and bachelor's degree in geography, and her research and professional work looks at how cities and urbanites change in relation to plans and actions related to sustainable development and community well-being. So Meg's going to have, you know, kind of a big, broad picture look at what we talk about here as we discuss the issue of social sustainability.
Thanks, Frances. I was just, you reminded me in those introductory remarks that I still give as introductory reading in my third year urban planning and policy course your great article in the Globe and Mail from like 2006 probably, which was, it had a nice picture of Langley, and it was home in the suburbs, heart in the city, or something like that. That was And that was it was a great story that told this sort of new demographic, in Langley. So thanks for providing that as an eye-opener to all of my suburban students. Okay, so hi, everyone. Thanks very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here and to be part of this panel. I'm happy to talk more about what gives me the right to say these things later on, perhaps in the questions or answers. I can try and defend where I'm coming from and what my background is. But right now, just to get to the point, I'm going to try and make 3 cases to you in an introductory way. So the first one, from my studies of model sustainable developments in different cities around the world, I'm going to make the case that today these kinds of eco-urban developments are first and foremost justified and argued in terms of their social components, so that every model eco-urban development has to be first a sort of a socially sustainable development. And what I'm going to do is just provide some of the ways or ideas or initiatives that different cities are using to make that case. And then we can talk about the extent to which they work or not too. Second, as an urban studies professor, I'm convinced that places like the Township of Langley, while they're classified in Statistics Canada terms as suburbs, actually are urban places by social standards. And so I'm going to provide you some justification for why I can say that. And then third, I'm going to say that places like Langley today actually have a greater opportunity to actually authentically address sustainable development, including its social imperative, than a place like the city of Vancouver where I live. So first, what does social sustainability look like in model sustainable neighborhoods? So the kinds of neighborhoods that are certified, labeled, advertised, built as models of sustainability. They do it in an economic way, and so this can take the form of what's called a jobs housing balance, so providing opportunities for jobs close to where people live. Encouragement and incentives for local businesses and jobs in what are known as emerging sectors that can be defined in variable ways. There's an organization called the Living Community Challenge, which operates a sustainability assessment tool, and they have a label called JUST. And that's a label that businesses can apply to and use as a stamp, like a Oceanwise seafood product or an energy, what is it called? Energy Star appliance, in order to say that that business is operating according to social justice principles. So those are some socially oriented economic initiatives that are being used to guarantee to offer a guarantee of social sustainability. Ecologically focused planning has social implications because by preserving green spaces, or in order to preserve wider swaths of green spaces, neighborhoods are often encouraging better transit, active transportation, and design that allows for those kinds of options to make sense, right? To be a real possibility to use instead of a private automobile. So you see cities advertising terms like a 5-minute city, or sometimes it's called a 20-minute city, depending on how fast you're willing to walk. And that's to say that your daily activities needs can be met within a 5-minute radius, for example. So that's a sort of a design implication that has social ramifications. Another way in which ecological initiatives can meet social sustainability objectives is in depaving exercises. So finding underused paved spaces in cities and getting residents or neighbors involved in returning those to an ecologically operational environment, so a green space, that also has opportunities to be used differently by the community. There's a set of initiatives according to livability and local preservation initiatives, and those focus on providing better amenities that are suited to particular demographics according to the need in the area, whether those are elderly, senior populations, different ages of youth, encouraging people to consider some public places the way they think about their own yards, but shared in a responsible way. There's also a democratic element to some social sustainability initiatives that we see. So this is the provision of spaces that are explicitly designed and made open for provision of information from citizen to citizen, or from government to citizen, or from citizen to government. Provision of services, like maybe language services that we can offer to new immigrants, for example. Even citizen involvement in the design of neighborhoods and buildings, from design charrettes to co-housing initiatives where people are actually involved in designing their own housing. There's an equitability dimension, and so these are initiatives in housing affordability and housing mix to ensure that there is an open door for people from different socioeconomic statuses to live in a neighborhood. And there's a diversity element too, and so these are the areas where I think there is the most need for new kinds of ideas about social sustainability, but there is an idea about preserving and welcoming a diversity of social, cultural, and economic groups. Okay, so that's a run-through of some of the ways in which we see social sustainability operating and some of what are considered to be the best examples of ecologically sustainable neighborhoods. So why is Langley already socially an urban place? I think because what we're seeing is a sort of an political and a social inversion or involution that's happening, whereas the core city used to be the place that would accept new immigrants and low-income people, people without a whole lot of choices or connections. Now the suburbs are becoming that site of welcome and that site of landing for people. The form of growth in suburbs like Langley is also moving away from single-family homes. Langley is in the minority of municipalities in the region in terms of building still a predominantly ground-oriented housing form, 69%, but a third of that new housing that's built is townhomes. So that means that all in all, there is a majority of new housing being built in Langley that is not single-family homes. So that's a change from what we consider to be a classical suburb. And also there's plenty of evidence that Langley is taking part in a political shift from the sort of the classical Leave It to Beaver idea of a suburb in which residents are not politically very engaged, to a very engaged population where there's lots of citizen contestation over development and planning. You guys can talk to me more than I can talk to you about some of those sites of protest, like Brookswood, and what some of those contests look like. Okay, why does Langley have more opportunity than a city like Vancouver to develop an authentic social sustainability strategy? That, I'm going to just say briefly, has to do with a movement in the approach to planning for sustainability in cities, whereas the first generation was really focused on a design argument, so a reaction against sprawl, and that turned out to be not, well, it's turned out to be sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy that as cities have grown, as our region has grown, we have had to grow to accommodate more compact development, whether we like it or not, and a lot of residents don't like it, and some do. To a second generation that's really focused on the infrastructural costs and the cost savings that exist in planning effectively and planning with social sustainability in mind. There are an increasing number of those kinds of cost arguments that are being made. The Housing plus Transportation Cost Burden Study that some of you will have heard about that Metro Vancouver did, showing that even though Langley is a very affordable place in the region when it comes to housing choice, when you add on the fact that Langley has the most expensive cost of transportation in the region, you guys spend about $16,000 a year on average on transportation, Langley is actually the most expensive place in the region to live if you're a renter, and second only to Richmond if you're a homeowner. So things like that. But the third generation is where I think, where social sustainability planning is moving now, and where I think Langley has a big opportunity, and that's toward a logic of trying to design and plan with well-being in mind and with health in mind. And so I will leave that for you to think about, and maybe we can talk about it next in a question and answer round. Thanks.
Thank you. So next we're going to hear from Stephen D'Souza, who has been a resident of Burnaby for a while, although originally from Montreal. He is the Executive Director of Burnaby Community Services, and he completed an executive program in something I'd never heard of before, social entrepreneurialism, from Stanford in California. And he has spent decades working with local and regional partners in Burnaby to design solutions to reducing poverty and isolation. So, you know, we have the good theoretical look at sustainability, and then we have someone working on the ground on you know, one particular aspect of sustainability in a community. So, Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me here today. I'm not like Francis. I don't get a lot of opportunities to speak on a panel, so if I stumble a bit, bear with me. I wanted to reflect, as Francis said, on sort of the practical side of some of the work we're doing in our community, and I want to be bringing in some examples of the work we've done in the last couple of years. So I'll mention a few things that I've been involved in. One, in 2011, I was on the City of Burnaby Steering Committee for developing a social sustainability strategy. I'm currently the co-chair of the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition, and I'm a member of the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction's Advisory Forum that's developing a poverty reduction plan for BC right now. And I'm an architect and one of the partners in Allies in Aging, which is a project looking at reducing seniors' isolation. So I mention those only in that I'll bring these up through some of the description of what I'm talking about today. When Burnaby Community Services looks at how we address social issues in our community, we come from the lens that if you empower people, they'll improve their lives and their community. And so it's working with people to foster their sustainability and their resilience. And by doing that, you'll build a better community. So that's the lens we use, and we come at from three different directions. Trying to provide people with resources, opportunities, and voice. And so by looking at those three pieces, we feel that That's our approach to planning and social sustainability planning. And I'm going to look at them from the reverse end, voice first. When we think about how we develop plans, programs, and services, we go to the people with lived experience first. Talk to them about what they're going through and the challenges they're facing, the barriers they have, and start from there. As opposed to going in with our lens and what we think the solutions will be, then piloting those and finding out if they work or making sure they work because our funders expect them to. We try to go to our clients. We could try to go to those people we haven't had a chance to speak with because they don't access our services, and get a sense of why they're not accessing our services, why they're not engaging in the way that we think they should be, and trying to see what those barriers are. For example, right now, as we're developing the consultation process across the province for a poverty reduction strategy, the ministry had already decided it was going to do 20 large-scale consultations across the community and hired Spark to come in and do that. And so there have been consultations across, and there's ongoing consultations across the province. In one of our first meetings, and I think it was our first meetings, we really clearly identified that that wasn't enough. Large-scale consultations in a community that is very rural means it's hard for a lot of people to get to that. If it's in the evening, it might be hard for seniors or people with children to attend. If it's a room full of different people and there's youth there who are trying to get their voices heard, oftentimes they're challenged by that. They don't feel like they're comfortable with it. Individuals with disabilities, like the list goes on and on. These large-scale consultations don't work for everyone. So in addition to an online survey, which again keeps people away and isn't the most accessible, we pushed for small community conversations, directly funded to those organizations who work with vulnerable communities and marginalized people. So those agencies who work with them would come up with a format and have the supports they need to have those conversations. So if you're looking at single parents having childcare on site that's funded and people can come, or have childcare subsidies, because if you have a child with disabilities or a child that sometimes has bad behavior, you don't feel comfortable bringing them into childcare where you don't know the educators, you don't know the people there, but if you get a subsidy, you can have your babysitter of choice come and watch your child. So trying to be flexible and those people who work with those communities of vulnerable populations to be there to support them. So looking to make sure that people have input in the topics and the plans and programs that serve them. We have a saying in the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition, which is not for me without me. And it's really making sure that you tailor the services to the people who need it. We took that in a different direction in our project around seniors isolation. We were looking at transportation within Metro Vancouver and how seniors are often left out of transportation options. So we partnered with SFU and a Masters in Community Health program to do something called a Human-Centered Design Lab, where we brought in seniors from across our communities to meet with these students, who hold a focus group with them, to add to the research and learning that they were doing, but to hear directly from the seniors what the challenges they were doing, challenges they were facing. And we asked them through that focus group to pull out themes, but also to pick one person that they would think about. And we call it designing from the margin, or designing from the fringe. Pick one person and design what the solution would be for them. And then, so they went away, they brainstormed, they came up with ideas, and then we went back to those same seniors and said, here are some ideas, what do you think? And they gave incredible feedback to these ideas, and these students were able to take that and reiterate a new idea, and reiterate a new idea. And from that, we have 3 new projects that we're working on to try to bridge some of the barriers in transportation for seniors in our community. So it's going to the people with lived experience to get their feedback. So that's voice. The second is opportunities. When we think about opportunities, it's around participation and meaningful participation for people in our community. How do we make sure that our spaces, that our buildings, our sidewalks, allow people to be out, allow people to know their neighbors and not live in towers of isolation, to go out into community centers when they may be experiencing barriers? How do we give people opportunities and choice about where they want to go? And that is an interesting challenge in a city like Burnaby, and I'm not sure if it's similar in the Township of Langley, where it's just growing so fast. We have so much development happening around really concentrated areas, people moving in, people moving out, people from all over the world coming into our community who don't necessarily speak the language, don't understand the culture, and we don't speak their language or understand their culture, and there's just this clash that's happening. So what do we do to create spaces where people have opportunities to get to know one another, to connect with one another? When we looked at our plan in 2011 for Burnaby, a good portion of the plan focuses on that. Looking at how are people involved, how do people get involved, how do we celebrate diversity and difference in a way that helps us understand one another better? How can our policing add to our sense of safety, which means we're comfortable going out at night and being in our spaces? What does our built environment look like? What does our transportation look like? It's all about getting people to participate and giving them a space where they feel welcome and appreciated in those spaces. One of the projects within Allies in Aging is called Welcoming Senior Spaces. And Welcoming Senior Spaces works with community centers, libraries, coffee shops, to look at what are some of the barriers to seniors accessing their space. What are the things that maybe mobility challenges, maybe early onset dementia, or hearing impairment? Because so frequently when a librarian's trying to point you in a direction, they look in the direction they're trying to point you, and if you're reading lips, you've lost entirely what they've said. So speech readers struggle in spaces. So working with local merchants, working with local businesses, working with community centers, to have them think intentionally about what they're doing to make their space open. And incorporating some of the things that are in the strategy into everyday practice in their spaces. And it's been an interesting challenge that we've learned, because every time we bring a new senior in, they come with their own sets of challenges and barriers, and we have to work with staff to make the space open for them. And it's been a learning experience for us as we've gone forward, and it's been really great as well. The third piece is resources, and resources tends to be the critical piece, because if you don't have what you need, then you can't participate and you don't have a voice. So how do we ensure that people aren't just meeting their basic needs, which realistically, I don't understand how that's still a problem in our communities, but how do we make it so that basic needs isn't a daily struggle? And so that they can get out and participate, so they can be involved and have their voice be heard. And so we have a section again within the Burnaby Social Sustainability Strategy that looks directly at basic needs. But unfortunately, we know that municipalities struggle within mandates, within what is within their mandate to be able to do something about. So we tried to look for what are some things that cities do have in terms of looking to ensure there's a continuum of housing in a community. What are some of the zoning strategies you can use to make sure that there's affordable and appropriate housing for people to live? The 5-minute rule, was that it? The 5-minute rule? That's brilliant. I mean, that's how you build communities, is using those strategies to make sure that in someone's community where they can walk to is local, nutritious food, and not having these fast food deserts where that's the only thing you can get for blocks around. How do you make food that's nutritious, local, and affordable close to people? So meeting basic needs, yes, it's about income and making sure people have jobs, but in Burnaby, 9.4% of Burnaby residents who are working are still below the poverty line. That's over 10,000 people in Burnaby who are working sometimes full-time but precarious work or part-time jobs, and are still struggling to make ends meet. So we have a project where we're trying to work with those living in poverty who are working to get them career counseling from BCIT Student Association, by working with our Burnaby Board of Trade to talk about what are some of the opportunities that could be in our community to help people advance in their careers, to find work that's stable, that has benefits, can give them in a position where they can afford childcare and transportation. What can we do in our community to make it sustainable so that people can live, work, and play in our space and have the time and the capacity to be able to do that? So those are some of the ways that we in Burnaby Community Services have been looking at what does social sustainability look like, and focusing on voice, resources, and opportunities, focusing on empowering people to change their lives and change their communities, because we think with strong, resilient, sustainable people, you get stronger, more resilient, more sustainable places to live. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a really nice contrast, having both of those sides. Now we're going to hear from Mary Ellen Schaafsma, who is the Director of Social Innovation and Research at the United Way of the Lower Mainland, so serving the whole region. She has a Master's in Health Administration and a Certificate in Social Innovation. And since 2016, her social innovation focus has been on fostering social purpose in businesses in the Lower Mainland to help companies in the region understand the business case and adopt a social purpose at their core. So that's going to be a completely different angle on this.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great to be here tonight, be part of this panel. Yeah, we were asked to think about what does social sustainability mean to us, and I'm with Stephen. It really is about resilience. It's the capacity of people to come together, to ask the right questions, to look at the issues going on in their community and seek solutions, seek to co-create solutions. And it's about thriving communities, really. And I work at the United Way, you know, and when I'm in the office, I often hear us talking about community. And I started listening to what do we mean when we talk about community, and I realized even internally in the social sector, we're talking about the social service sector, maybe with some help from government, and the people that access services, and then the people that help support the services. And that's how we define community. But the United Way also works with the business sector. They are our donors. They do workplace campaigns. They give funds to us so that we can support community. And we don't really incorporate the business community and the big C community, like all of us. And we're all part of community, including our businesses. So actually that was sort of an aha moment for me a couple of years ago, starting to think, how can we look at business and all of the resources and assets that they bring, not just their dollars and volunteering hours, which we appreciate and we need, but there's so much more that they can bring to help community, capital C, address social issues and become socially sustainable. So that's a project we've been working on, social purpose in business. And just thinking about the components of social sustainability, and I think there's a bit of a misconception as well that sustainability is either economic sustainability or environmental sustainability or social sustainability. But you can't have one without the other or two without one. They go hand in hand, they're intertwined. You know, you may have somebody with incredible economic stability, but if they, or sustainability, but if they don't have the social interactions, the social connectedness within their community, it's not a holistic sustainability picture. Loneliness. Loneliness is as bad for your health as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. Social connections are important. You can have all the money in the world, but no social connections, and your life is not, you're not thriving. Your life isn't, you're not experiencing well-being. So it does go beyond the social safety net for sure. Looking at a lot of it, even, and I think the business community is starting to recognize this. You look at the Sustainable Development Goals. These are a set of, I think, 17 or so goals developed at the UN that looking at what are the social trends that affect us all globally, and then you can take it down to the local level and look at the social trends that affect us regionally. And actually, the social issues that affect us on a personal level also affect businesses. You know, they need healthy workforce. There's labor shortages. There's childcare issues for the workforce. There's mental health issues, substance abuse, all of that. It impacts at every level. So there really is a role for business in social sustainability, and we need to tap into those resources, expertise, assets that businesses have, bring them into the conversation, their perspectives as well. I think for decades, the social sector with governments have been trying to tackle some of these deepest entrenched social issues, and we haven't made a significant dent. And I believe it's time, and I think business is seeing now more and more that they do have a role to play to bring in new perspectives, to envision the future that we want for ourselves, for thriving communities, think through what are the components that we need to have in place to have that, and then look at where we're at today, and where's the gap, and what do we need to do together. Almost start with a clean slate and create some new solutions, try some new things to try to address some of the social issues that are going on in our communities. So every sector working together, looking at things in a holistic way, not one problem at a time, not economic over here, environmental over here, social over here, bring it all together. Look at the problems holistically. Emphasis will change depending on what you're working on, but it's time to sort of break down the silos, include everybody in on community, tap into all the assets and resources that exist, and see what we can come up with together to create more thriving and resilient communities. And I think the township has a real opportunity here to display leadership, both internally and by supporting businesses through policies, through education, through convening, to come together, to bring them around the table, to start those conversations. The township itself could start demonstrating social purpose. They could look at hiring practices, procurement, internal policies, things like that, to sort of role model what that looks like for businesses and give examples of what that, how that can play out. So, and also could work, a lot of universities and academic institutions are beginning to look at how academia can contribute more than just education and equipping, people to go out and do this, but how can they participate in social sustainability, and then working together with municipalities, with the business sector, with the social sector, with the labor movement. It takes all of us, and it's all very intertwined. And actually, I've been doing a lot of reading around social purpose in business and noticing that it's all converging. All of these three sort of perspectives are converging into one. I think in 10 years, we're not going to be talking about the green movement and the social, and it's all going to be the same. I don't know what it'll be called, but it'll be one conversation, and that is progress, and it's great to see.
Great. Thank you. And now for something completely different, Revelstoke. So Jill Zacharias is from Revelstoke, or has been for the last, what was it, 32 years? No?
Well, since 92.
Yeah, since 92. I knew there was a 2 in there somewhere.
Many years.
So, it's really good to have that perspective of, we have a suburb, a region, now a smaller town, smaller than Langley, but dealing with some of the same problems of growth, how to mesh your local population with the economy and so on. So Jill is a community development consultant in Revelstoke, and she worked for the city as the social development coordinator since 2008. And she got interested in that whole topic while doing her diploma in community economic development at SFU. I think SFU is really well represented here. It's where my master's is from, so yeah, all SFU all the way. She said that she views social sustainability as the most complex and least understood aspect of society, yet the most critical to overall health and well-being of communities. So, Jill.
Well, this is, thank you very much for having me. I had a beautiful drive from the interior today. Thank goodness it wasn't snowing on the Coquihalla. And it's really interesting listening to the fellow panelists, because I'm definitely going to take kind of a more philosophical view here. But in Canadian society today, we're all seeking the same thing: good quality of life, vibrant, healthy, safe communities where we can, as was said, where we can live, work, play, raise our families, and age gracefully. The concept of sustainability evolved in response to the global realization that as a species, we are impacting our planet dramatically, and our actions today impact future generations. We realized that we needed to pay attention in order to survive. To this end, much work has been done around environmental sustainability and the economic bottom line. But until fairly recently, the social bottom line has largely been taken for granted, particularly in developed countries like Canada, that comparatively function pretty well for the most part. We figured that if we support healthy economic growth, everything will be just fine. And within the Canadian context, what this basic belief has resulted in is, over the past 40 years, a progressive systemic withdrawal of the social safety net that was established by government in the Second World War to assist with putting our society back together, and for which Canada was once known across the globe. So here we are today. We find ourselves in an increasingly complex society. And despite the fact that our economy is doing pretty well in general, on the ground, in our communities, we're facing things like an increasing lack of affordable housing and deeply embedded poverty. Huge, complex, pervasive issues that are completely overwhelming and threaten to undermine the healthy function of our society. I have come to believe that the social sustainability of our communities is foundational and the very bedrock for all other aspects of sustainability. How can we support good environmental decision-making and initiatives if we are socially dysfunctional? How can we have solid economic growth if at least 20% of our citizens are struggling or can barely meet their basic needs and have no disposable income? How can we strive for the simple overarching goal to provide the best possible quality of life for residents if the ability of individuals, groups, and organizations to function is compromised? I've come to realize that if we don't pay attention to the social sustainability of our communities and our societies, the road forward is going to be a tough one indeed. So you've heard there are all kinds of different elements to social sustainability, but for me it comes down to two basic concepts: capacity and connectedness, or social cohesion, interconnectedness. And I'm going to use a really hokey metaphor, sorry. But think of a complex tapestry that is both beautiful and extremely well made. The tapestry as a whole would not exist if, as Stephen said, each individual thread were not strong and beautiful unto itself. The tapestry as a whole would not exist if the way each thread was woven together was weak, or the connections between each thread were not strong. So if we pull it apart, in order for each individual in our communities to have healthy, functional capacity, they need to be able to meet their basic needs, have a roof over their heads, food on the table, physical and mental well-being, and meaningful employment and income security, access to education, healthy family, social relationships, et cetera, et cetera. Individuals need to have a strong sense of place and connection to community and to be free of discrimination and hate. The healthier an individual is in terms of capacity, the more they are able to function, connect with others, and participate in community life. And I just read an article out of the UK the other day that cited research showing how our immune system responds to social contact and connection to the community. So community connectedness. And in turn, how people without strong social connections or who suffer from social stress are more prone to inflammation, which impacts their community, which impacts their immunity. So this is a physiological response. In any case, all these individual threads come together in patterns or clusters of connections that emerge as community-based groups and government organizations, businesses, and other social structures. In order to function, these social structures also need to have healthy capacity. They need to have enough expertise and money to operate. Operational procedures and processes must be functional. There must be healthy communication, both internally and externally. They need to have a strong volunteer base, a good workforce. Again, we see a need for strong capacity and systems in place that promote and strengthen interconnectedness. Then if we stand back and we look at the whole picture, the community emerges. The weft and weave, the interconnectedness, that social cohesion. There must be healthy democratic processes, systems, and structures that promote connectedness within and outside the community at informal, formal, and institutional levels. So paying attention to the various elements that constitute healthy individual or organizational capacity from that bird's eye view or a community-wide perspective promotes strong community capacity. So you stand back from the whole community. Is there enough affordable housing? What about community-wide food security or diverse and equitable access to opportunities for employment, recreation, and cultural expression and engagement? These are all aspects of healthy community capacity. The physical setting you've heard about today, the lay of the land, public spaces that promote interconnectedness, like community gardens, parks, libraries, a beautiful center like this, and other facilities, as well as the transportation systems that connect them. So we've also heard that, so the United Nations outlined 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and 9, over half, relate directly to social sustainability. I could list them all, but I won't. Breaking it down like this, we see that everyone, from individuals, organizations, and businesses to various levels of government, everyone is integral to the social sustainability of our communities and society as a whole. But no one or no one system is separate or can fully function independently from the others. Working alone or in silos is not enough. Complex problems require complex solutions. We are all in this together. The mandate of most social sector organizations is to do frontline work. The mandate of government is to support the healthy function of society. And local government is uniquely positioned to take the lead, to bring people together, to facilitate proactive planning, to analyze, provide strategic direction, and raise awareness of community-wide social issues, to help build relationships among the diverse organizations and sectors that comprise the community, to support the development of partnerships and bring together resources to support action that will enable positive social change. To advocate, we can't forget this, to advocate to and work with higher levels of government. And of course, but this is only a small piece of the puzzle, to implement related municipal policies that support social sustainability. So I believe that by taking on a social role, local government is neither duplicating nor addressing something that is outside of its jurisdiction, but rather paying attention and working towards fulfilling its own vision of a good quality of life for all residents.
Okay, that was a lot to think about. I think given that we have about 25 minutes left and there's a lot of people here probably with some interesting things to say and observations, I thought one of the more useful things might be if people, I mean you can do whatever you want, but here's my suggestion for part of it, is if people could talk about Langley in specific and what you see that is working in terms of social sustainability that you'd like people maybe to talk about, or what isn't, where the gaps are. Because I'm sure that there are some things already in the community that really help foster some of the goals that people here talked about, and I'm sure that you can also all think of big holes in the fabric. Where more needs to be done. So that might be a really useful thing, is for us to learn from you about what you think is working and not working in terms of interconnectedness, resilience, and the rest of it in your community. But also, of course, do feel free to ask whatever you want. So we are supposed to have microphones. Oh, there's two microphones. So people will walk around to amplify you. You won't have to yell if you have a question. So yeah, the first hand went up back here. And I think it might be nice if you could identify yourself,
Sure.
for people, if you don't mind.
Cynthia Hamilton.
I promise not to tweet out your name.
That's okay. It's Cynthia Hamilton, and I'm with the Willoughby Residents Association. And I'm wondering, I see recently in Langley, the various residents associations have now come together, and I see several members of the Township of Langley Community Associations. I'm wondering if you could address specifically the role and direction and part that community associations can play in social sustainability, specifically with voice, which I loved hearing, and you just had so many fantastic things to say about interaction in that, and I'm wondering if maybe you could just comment on that, please.
Well, I think the key thing for organizations is coming together. You know, I think that you know, we've had quite a bit of success in Revelstoke in moving forward with a number of different in a number of different areas, and kind of the key factors of success are, you know, one of the strongest key factors of success is partnerships, and kind of leaving your you know, baggage or quite frankly at the door, and coming together around a common goal and saying, well, what, you know, this is what I can offer. This is what I can bring to the table. And I think that, you know, it's really important to strengthen dialogue between organizations, but also, as the panelists pointed out, you know, that intersectoral dialogue, so it is absolutely critical, because it can't just be all on, you know, community-based organizations. You know, businesses have a huge stake in the whole thing, and you know, businesses can really bring that expertise and that energy and entrepreneurial spirit to the table, I think that, yeah, I think that just initiating dialogue is really important. But the thing that I see that is lacking in many communities is that you need to have someone whose function it is to bring people together. Because frontline service provider, like Stephen is busy. Like, you're a busy guy, right? It's, you know, and you're doing your best, and you're doing amazing things. But he can't also do off the side of his desk that the big picture stuff.
Yeah, and you referenced voice in particular, which was something Stephen brought up, so maybe you want to talk to that.
Sure. Thinking about neighborhood associations, we have a group in the Edmonds area called Edmonds People and Community. Yeah, Edmonds People and Community, there we go. And EPIC has been critical in the Edmonds area, which is incredibly diverse. It has, in the local school, has 132 different languages spoken, has refugees from all around the world, and has struggled with a sense of identity as it's constantly shifting. But EPIC decided that, one, it would host a community fair, so worked with the local community center to give a sense of continuity and space, and this is for everyone. Worked on not only a community garden, but a new program called In My Backyard, which is allowing people to open their backyards up for other people to garden in it. So creating relationships just within your block to other people to come and garden in your space. And they stood up and said, we want a homeless shelter. We're not interested in NIMBYism. We want it, bring it into our community. We are open and welcoming. So our neighborhood associations have played a really critical role in saying, this is what we want our neighborhoods to be, this is what we want our community to be, and the city needs to get on board, or we'll just be louder. And so they've been really involved, and it's been great to see the community get really involved in that way. The other side of voices, we have a community table called Voices of Burnaby Seniors. And it's the seniors themselves who, at first we brought them together to talk about the tsunami of seniors that are coming and the issues we need to address. But instead they said, you know what, you need to listen to us. And so they began to not only identify the problems, but the solutions. And we need your help in implementing them as social service providers, but we're going to go to the city, we're going to go to the province, we are going to be advocates for ourselves. So taking ownership and empowering your own voice and the voice of people around you, I think is incredibly important.
Those are nice examples, because I have to say, honestly, in Vancouver, resident groups largely form these days to oppose development. Often there's not a sense of other activities that they could do. I don't know if that feels the same out here or in your communities. That might come up again. But we have other questions here, so we'll go to the next one.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Daniel Snyder, and I do have a bit of a specific question. We acknowledged earlier on that Langley has some of the same problems as big cities, and specifically I want to just mention the issue of substance abuse, considering health and well-being that was talked about. Recently, the federal government mentioned some specific guidelines for treatment with the, this is in regards to the opiate overdose crisis, which Langley is quite affected by. 36 people died here last year. My question is around the issue of access to opiate agonist therapy and the clinics that provide that therapy. Langley really doesn't have one. Access to that resource is limited, difficult for people that want that resource. I'm just wondering if you can kind of speak to how vital a resource like that would be for Langley. And considering the opiate crisis, should we take action on this right away?
So, who feels like they can answer that? I didn't hear people talking too much about health issues, but is there somebody?
I don't know if I can specifically say whether or not the Township of Langley should get involved in it, only to say yes, it should. One of the issues with our Board of Trade is they have a social sustainability committee and have real interest in social issues. And just over the last couple of weeks, every few years, they send out a survey asking what are the critical issues that are impacting your business. And there's a sort of a pre-survey done amongst some of the businesses, say what are some of the topics you want on that, because we can't include everything. And there were things like newcomers, homelessness, caregivers, increasingly a big issue of people taking time off work to care for their elderly loved ones or for a child with disabilities. Opioid was at the top of the list, that businesses wanted to ask other businesses if mental health, addictions, and particularly the opioid crisis was an issue. So I think we're seeing that in all layers of our communities, from social to government. The business is saying we need to take action, and we need to take action that addresses the underlying issues that are feeding the opioid crisis and not just the crisis. And so yes, I think the Township of Langley should take action, because I think all communities need to be taking action to address a critical issue right now, but look at it deeper than the symptom and look at the underlying causes.
And that's what I would just reiterate, really, is that you need to look at the root cause of, something like the opioid crisis and mental health and addictions, and really support the individuals. And then, yeah.
And I can't say anything specifically about the opioid crisis out here, but what I can say about the move towards taking health, which is typically a federal or provincial policy, more seriously in municipalities, is the My Health, My Community study that Vancouver Coastal Health ran, and is in the process of running for a second time now. Gives us a new way, maybe, to advocate and argue for this kind of a different approach to addressing the root causes of drug addiction, and just some snippets of what that survey tells us. And it was a big survey, and it was a very expensive one to run, but they're committed to doing it again with Fraser Health as well, so this is region-wide. Individuals, for example, across our region, both health districts, with a strong sense of community belonging, had two times higher odds of reporting excellent or very good mental and general health, And individuals with 4 or more confidants, people that they could call in a time of a crisis, had 1.5 to 2 times higher odds of reporting excellent or very good health. And so this is just reinforcing right here in our community that there are strong statistical evidence that if we can increase our social connections and our sense of well-being, then we can increase our longevity, increase our immunity, reduce the burden on our emergency health services, and so this sort of investment in community pays off in other ways.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Hi, my name's Bill Massey. Something twigged on me when you were giving Megan's, going through Megan's credentials, and that is that she works on wellness indices. And I'm just wondering what the panelists think of the practicality and usefulness of developing a wellness index for Langley to guide decision makers and assess progress.
Oh, that sounds interesting. Yeah,
Sure.
go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
Your
So
question.
Canada is a real leader in measuring and monitoring wellness and well-being. Some of you may have heard of the Kingdom of Bhutan, which was sort of known for launching a gross happiness initiative. But what you probably haven't heard is that was actually the result of some very good Canadian advice from a Newfie who was actually living over there because he was pursuing Buddhism in a very serious way. So that framework for gross national happiness in Bhutan is what guides the Canadian Index of Well-being, which is an initiative that's housed at the University of Waterloo, but is being rolled out at the provincial level and also in strategic ways in partnerships with communities. And so to date, they've worked with a few communities in Ontario. Guelph is one of them that's made some headway. So that would be one that the Township of Langley could look to and to see how that's worked for Guelph in order to see whether or not it might be applicable here. Other resources to draw from, the Vancouver Foundation now has gotten into surveying and reporting out on wellness and livability through the Vital Signs Initiative, which has been going on for more than 10 years now in a periodic way, not every year, but the results of that survey can be used at the sub-regional scale, so to address what's going on in Langley. It's a online survey-based approach. It's not tailored for political uptake by sort of the Township of Langley as a government, but there are ways in which the results could lead to those kinds of conversations. And it helps that you can then benchmark your progress to those of other communities that you would consider to be peers.
And I think, I don't know if any of the councillors here might know about this, some of the longer term ones, but I think the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has a quality of life.
They used to.
Oh, it's gone. Okay, well, so much for that. Okay.
Well, and I just want to say a little bit about the benefit of measuring things. You know, I think that whenever I do community development or do higher level strategic planning, you know, we try to target our activities to affect change. But we could say, okay, well, I have this really great idea. Let's run an anxiety program in the grade 4 classrooms, anxiety identification and prevention program. But how do you know if it's working? So, you know, you can do small tests of change, you can do, you know, kind of larger measurements, but at the end of the day, it's really important to know you're moving forward and to know that your targeted kind of strategic planning, strategic initiatives are actually making an impact. So I do think that as you're developing your social sustainability strategy, it is a very good idea to also develop indicators, but indicators that are easy to access, you know, and kind of universally acceptable, and that you can, but that you can measure your progress over time, so you know you're moving forward.
Great. Oh, okay. ahead.
Hello there, Rob Young, Aldergrove resident. Not really representing anybody, but I guess just an observer of livability and what I would see as social development issues out in Aldergrove. Without belaboring the topic and taking too long, right now we have a livability issue with, and I don't think we're unique, with, say, homeless, mentally ill, drug-addicted people that the residents' impacts are that we see a lot of small theft. We see a lot of issues in the community with people struggling, and I don't intend to hold council accountable for it. I think they're putting resources in, but it's been a conventional approach with respect to increasing policing and so on. I noticed that we're something like 25% of our budget now for policing, and the community's probably calling for more. The challenge that before us all is that, you know, when you do call the police for somebody stealing something small but important to you out of your yard, the police will come right back with, hey, I'm here for you, if you can, of course, coax the dispatcher into getting somebody to show, is that they're saying, Crown will do nothing with this. I will be here as a support. I'll go talk to that guy if I can find him, but it isn't really working in a criminal model, and they're trying. I'm sort of hoping this process might find a way to find some more social solutions mixed in with that to perhaps, you know, we can talk about outreach workers and try to tie resources, get resources together for these people. And no, I don't see it as council spending money trying to fix this out of a budget themselves. It's a multi-level problem. It's going to take perhaps maybe more municipal coordination and taking money from community, federal, provincial, this new drug support money. I would see this thing as a possibility to sort of nudge it from the bottom up, as well as all those other initiatives that, you know, make community. Thank you.
So that's definitely one of the gaps, it sounds like. Does anyone want to respond to that?
Sure. I agree, and I think that is part of the problem I was speaking to, is that we've been relying on just certain systems to help us with our issues, and by bringing in the broader community, all members of the community, including the business community, to get at those root causes, to prevent things before they happen, to prevent people from getting to the point where they're doing petty theft and these things that the justice system is overwhelmed, can't deal with. That would be the ideal way, a social sustainability strategy for sure. And just thinking about, you know, your citizens, most of you are employees, your consumers, your voters, your individuals within your own ecosystems and neighborhoods and communities. And you're not powerless. There are things that you can do. As employees, talk to your employer. You know, encourage them to think about what does our business bring that we can contribute to help solving these issues. As a consumer, look for those businesses that are contributing into community and support those businesses so that they can do more as they grow and contribute to thriving communities. Thriving communities makes the business grow. They can give more back to community. It's a virtuous circle. As voters, of course, you know, you can influence policy, but through your votes, through advocacy, through talking to your elected officials. So there's a lot that can be done to help ease the strain on all of the other systems that are just overburdened. And as citizens, there are things you can do. So that's quite empowering, really.
I think Stephen. Yeah, go ahead.
Two things came to mind. One is looking beyond the justice system to a restorative justice model, which really tries to bring the victim and the perpetrator together to talk about the impacts that it would have. It doesn't happen in all cases, particularly when mental health and addictions is involved, but it does take it out of sort of the formal justice system and could have some approach here. The second, thinking about a program in New Westminster that was called Eyes on the Street, I think, which had small businesses working with a local nonprofit that worked with those who are homeless and had mental health issues to provide small jobs on a particular block. sweeping up the streets, taking care of the community. So those who were homeless felt like that was their home too. They were participating, felt they were contributing, and they were less likely to commit a crime in that community, hopefully commit a crime at all. But it was still creating a sense of belonging. So in terms of what you can do, you know, particularly neighborhood associations might be able to play a role, but you know, thinking to yourself that there are people, maybe having a conversation with them, investing some of your time in what they're going through, and looking to see if there's partner organizations and businesses that might want to look at small local solutions to things and not looking for government to come in with big, well-funded programs.
Did you want to?
Yeah, just one thing, that was a great particular example. Thanks for that, because I was struggling to think of a good particular example. But the big picture reflection that I had on your comment was that while sustainable development is known as an approach that seeks to get us to look farther than ourselves, like farther than our own self-interest and farther than our own generation, social sustainability as a lens in particular also requires for us to look back at sort of the injustices that have piled up over time, and that, you know, we're not able to sort of just snap our fingers and make disappear.
Thanks. There's a question there, and then I think somebody on this side, so I'll go there and then here.
Hi, I'm not going to stand up, I've got bad knees. Kieran and Helen here. Question, okay, you talk about voices within the community that kind of allow projects to kind of rise up. I'm kind of looking at it from the other side. Okay, you have municipal governments are looking to come up with a sustainable community plan. Okay, and I'm asking what types of social supports or directions should the municipal government be giving to the community? I mean, a lot of things that happen. There's a lot of things that they could be leading in, or should they be leading in, making decisions not for the community, but having the courage to kind of make decisions that may not be popular. So my question is really, what role should the municipal governments take in ensuring some of the voices that may not be heard, because there's a lot of NIMBYism, et cetera, around. What is the role of the municipal government to ensure that the voices are heard?
Who wants to take on that completely unproblematic, difficult question?
Well, I can't stress enough how important it is for local government to take that lead and in that convening role. And that I think that, you know, one of the things that is very powerful is coming from a strength-based or assets-based perspective. So it's super important to look at your community and really try and understand what is going well, what people are doing right, and then build upon that. But at the same time, create a solid enough public engagement process that really is from the ground up. You know, like Stephen was saying, I think that, you know, the voices of people with lived experience and to you know, engender that sense of connection and sense of belonging to community by not only asking for people's input, but then following through and acting on that input. So people see the impact of their contribution to community. And I think that, you know, the role of local government is to pull it all together, to pull all those pieces together. But then to take the lead on kind of, you know, implementing kind of community-wide change. And sometimes taking the lead and implementing community-wide change means that you have to step out. You have to be brave, and you have to say, you know, I remember years and years ago, I was touring some affordable housing developments in Whistler, and they were all amazingly successful places. There was a 5-plex where different kind of professionals and families were living in. There was like rows of townhouses. And, you know, and then there was a small lot that they had developed in a duplex or something, and a couple of RCMP officers were living there. And every single affordable housing development in Whistler that they tried to put forward was loudly protested by the neighbors. And, you know, it's like the homeless shelter. And the Whistler council at the time, you know, because they were desperately in need of affordable housing, stepped out and said, well, we understand your NIMBYism, and, you know, but at the same time,
reprehensible behavior.
We understand it. But at the same time, this is a really high need in our community, and I think that, you know, we've seen that, and they went ahead and built the affordable housing developments, and they really fulfilled a need in the community, and there was not ever an issue, and it ended up being really positive. So that's a real tough thing for a politician to do, but at the same time, I think that you can kind of offset that by good communication and respecting the neighbors and sitting down with them and saying, you know, and helping talk through the issues together and coming kind of to a mutual understanding.
So, Stephen, I saw you reach for the microphone, but we're at our time, and I want to try and get in one last question. So, sorry about that. I hope it'll be addressed to you.
Hi, Stephen. We worked together many years ago, so I guess it's 20 years I've known you. Pat Petrala from White Rock, but I work in the Lower Mainland in a number of different sectors. And the one sector that's not mentioned here in terms of civic partnerships is the faith community. And they basically got offloaded to take care of the homeless, do the soup kitchens, set up the shelters. And so they're a little bit absent in this room as well as other places. And so we can't forget all they've done and contributed, but the declining generations and engagement there is a vulnerability in some places. But here in Langley, they have the Lutheran Church, I think, is building the housing complex on their land. Lots of churches have great land, but they're not zoned for housing. But some of them have good attitudes about allowing social housing, but we have to dance around it. So I don't know if Burnaby's had any success with it, or other communities that you're aware of, and how we can promote and get the community to accept it, and not just come to show and sell sales pitches by council planning staff to look at the boards and not understand anything.
Just before anyone else jumps in, the new provincial government has created a branch in BC Housing, a hub is designated specifically to work with nonprofits and churches that want to redevelop their land. So that's going to be an extra resource that's available. But go ahead.
Sure. So I was going to say in response to the last question about the value of working with partners that work with vulnerable populations, and one of them was the faith community that I was going to mention. So this ties well, Pat, thank you. Give me a chance.
We arranged it that way.
Yes. I think we need to engage our faith communities, but typically when we think of our faith communities, we're frequently engaging sort of the Christian religions, and I say that only because in Burnaby we have some incredible mosques, we have some incredible temples, we have some incredible other communities that seek temples that bring food on a daily basis to our outreach centers, that are so engaged, and they also don't get recognized frequently, and I want to acknowledge their contributions to a lot of the work that we're doing. This comes back to what I think we were talking about in terms of engaging all the different partners. That we tend to think of things in silos, and I'll say I do think silos are good in some ways, because if something falls apart, there's other partners that are still there that can carry on. We have this tendency to centralize and try to create these umbrella organizations, but there's a danger in that. So bringing multiple partners to the table and having diversity of who is involved in projects and who's engaging in these actions, but doing it from what's called a collective impact lens, which really means having an intentional purpose that you're all working towards and have a common agenda that you're all working towards, then it doesn't matter if you're a big organization, a small organization, a faith community, government partners, as long as you have the same goal and you're working towards it, then if one of them falls down, someone else can step in and fill that void because there's some overlap and continuity of working together. And that's why plans are so great. So a social sustainability plan, if done well, will give you that intentional goal that you're all working towards, will hopefully give you measurement tools to see your progress along the way, but also say, hey, you know, this innovation we were trying isn't getting us there, so let's try a different approach because what you measure matters. So, okay, this isn't happening for us, so let's try something differently. So the social sustainability strategy, along with all the other strategies, give you a goal that you want to move towards. And at a community level, this is where the leadership comes in, I think. If your city council listens to the popular perspective, the marginal groups, works with partners to hear all those voices, you can say, this is what our community needs to be. You can yell that to champion, advocate that to provincial governments, federal governments. This is what our community needs to be. And we all, from faith community, social services, neighborhood associations, businesses, are all going to work together to get there, and you need to do it too.
I think that's a wonderful note to end on, and I'm sorry, I know that there were a few other people who had questions, but thank you. Let's have applause for the great answers and the great questions.
Thank you very much. Holy cow. That's a lot, isn't it? You know, the Township of Langley in the last couple of months has been working with our long-range planning and our community development department to work on a social sustainability strategy for the municipality. And just starting this conversation, I think, is a really good place to start. Meg, thank you for your comments about the 5-minute city. I look forward to perhaps Langley, parts of Langley being a part of a 5-minute city at some point. And I'm interested in learning more about the open door city mix and the different kinds of development that we can create here in the municipality to help with that. Stephen, thank you very much for your comments. You know, the transportation deficit here certainly leads to the challenges around isolation for our seniors and for other parts of our population here in the community, being as rural as Langley is. So I think we have a lot of opportunity there to sort of explore those kinds of discussions. And Mary Ellen, thank you very much for your comments. Langley has an incredibly generous business community, and I think they contribute significantly to the sustainability in our community in the way of providing good paying jobs and job security so people can acquire good food and housing here in our community. So I think that's really important that we talk about that in this process. And Jill, thank you for coming down for this discussion. I think the overall quality of life here in Langley is very high. I think that's why lots of people want to live here. The tapestry here in Langley, I think, has been well woven, but there's some fibers that certainly can be reinforced. So thank you for your contribution to the conversation. The Social Sustainability Task Force has been struck and will start to meet fairly soon, and I'm really looking forward to these discussions evolving because, gosh, if there was an easy solution, everybody would be doing it, but I'm really proud that Langley's decided to start the conversation and carry forward. So we have a small token of our appreciation. For those of you who haven't met Patrick Ward, this is our social planner for the Township of Langley. So thank you, Patrick, for putting this together. Thank you to the long-range planning team and our community development team, and to all of the township staff for putting this event together. And thank you to you guys for coming out tonight and listening to the speakers. There will be lots of opportunity for community input over the next few months, few years, 10 years, 12 years as this strategy evolves. But we will definitely reach out to you again for your expertise. So thank you very much for being here tonight, and thank you all for coming. Thank you and good night.